For Creamer Media's Polity, I'm Shannon de Rehove. Researcher and analyst Professor Raymond Suttner joins me for Suttner's View, a weekly commentary on South Africa's political scene. Welcome, Raymond.
Thank you.
Now, many people believe that how things turned out in South Africa after apartheid was not to be unexpected, as this is what often happens in liberation movements and revolutions. What is your view on this? And if that view is valid, do you think we're just on a downward trek that is irreversible?
Yeah, you know, a lot of people in the launches that I've been at have said to me, nothing that you describe is unexpected. But I don't buy into this idea of everything being inevitable. What we need to do is look at what were the conditions under which South Africa became a democratic state, and what were the decisions made along the way. And my view is there is nothing that says that we inevitably would have had the lawlessness that you have now or the violence that you have now, even if that were the case in a number of other states. We also need to look at the decisions that were made initially, the conditions that were made. Now, some people suggest something conspiratorial, what Ronnie Kasrils calls the Faustian Pact, and other people have said was some elite deal with the IMF and so forth. Now, I was in the leadership at the time. I know nothing about deals. If there were any such deals, I don't take any responsibility for it, because Ronnie Kasrils says, you know, he must take responsibility. Now, I don't understand why he or I should take responsibility for something if it happened, which we didn't even know about. Because when we made decisions in the negotiations, we were concerned that the bloodshed had to end, certain compromises had to be made to try to secure free and fair elections as quickly as possible. Now, as the decisions were made, in the minds of the future leadership of the country was the prospect of violence. The fact that many whites in the country, there was already a right-wing rebellion in former Bophuthatswana. There was the fact that many whites are armed, many have access to dynamite, and you had to create a climate where people who feared majority rule were reassured. So it was very, very important to understand that. Secondly, South Africa became a democratic state in an environment which was inhospitable for a transformatory program. The former allies of the ANC, former socialist states, were all in the process of collapsing. Now, they may have helped to fund a more transformatory type of economic program than the world as it was at that time, a unipolar world. And there was this fear that people would withdraw investment, that there would be a run on the rand and all these sorts of things. And the people need to understand that. Now, when we look at the trajectory that the ANC-led government has taken, we have to ask ourselves, what were decisive moments? Could there have been other ways of dealing with things? Now, I think that Gear was a decisive moment. The rise of Zuma was a decisive moment. Nkandla, Marikana, these were all decisive moments. And we have to ask ourselves, I understand the reasons for Gear, and I'm willing to accept that some people in good faith felt it was necessary to adopt a macroeconomic policy which would reassure the markets and so forth. The problem I have, however, is that originally the ANC believed in a demand-driven type of economic policy what was called growth through redistribution. The idea that higher wages created a demand and stimulated local industry, and that way you could both reduce inequalities and build the economy. That somehow disappeared in the 1990s. And I think the things that GEAR was supposed to deliver have not in fact been delivered in terms of increased investment and so forth. And it also introduced a way of viewing progress whereby reference was made to the fundamentals being in place. And the fundamentals meant low inflation, low deficit. And there was no emphasis on reducing unemployment, which is a very serious thing for our country. So what I feel is we need a situation where we recognize that sometimes a higher deficit is necessary in order to stimulate growth. And go back and reconsider things like that. However, I think despite the present government being a sort of revolt against Mbeki and GEAR, they in fact are carrying out very similar policies to that era.
How do you think we can go about remedying these wrong turnings?
Well, I don't know if I must use the word wrong turning in the sense that that is my evaluation, but I think what we need to do is try to build some conversation between stakeholders. Unfortunately, at this moment, the trade union movement is in disarray. COSATU has more or less collapsed. But we need to have, you have to have a buy-in from business to set this country on a growth path which business is prepared to contribute towards significantly through taxes and other means. We need to build some sort of social compact. But we need to also look at the other decisive things that I've referred to, like the illegalities around Nkandla, the corruption, the violence. We need to find a way of rallying citizens and saying no, not just no to xenophobia, no to violence, no to illegality, no to corruption. Try to have the voice of the citizen heard beyond the ballot box.
Thank you very much for your insight.
Thank you.
That was Professor Raymond Suttner speaking to Creamer Media's Polity about the problems with transformation.